I'm Lieutenant Dana Nolan, 28, an Army cyber warfare specialist in Austin, Texas, who believed my greatest purpose was to serve my country. I was tasked with hunting down the person behind a critical national security breach, a ghost threatening to get our undercover agents killed. But the crushing blow wasn't tracing the attack back to my own family's basement. It was discovering the hacker was my genius little brother. He hadn't done it to commit treason, but to erase the evidence proving our father, a powerful politician, was the real traitor who had been selling out his country for years. Now, that same man is ready to throw his own son under the bus, turning him into the perfect scapegoat to cover his crimes. They backed me into a corner, believing I would choose between my family and my oath. But they forgot one thing: my job is to hunt ghosts in the machine, and my oath is to protect the innocent. And I will use the very skills they trained me with to burn their entire world of lies to the ground. The only light in the room came from the glow of 6 monitors, each one a universe of scrolling green and black code. This was my sanctuary, my battlefield. A sensitive compartmented information facility, or SCIF, deep in the heart of Fort Sam Houston. No windows, no connection to the outside world, just the low hum of servers and the frantic, silent dance of data. My name is Lieutenant Dana Nolan, and my job is to hunt ghosts in the machine. For the past 72 hours, we'd been hunting a poltergeist. It started as a whisper, a single, anomalous data packet flagged by an automated threat detector in the Department of Defense's most secure network. By the time my team was brought in, the whisper had become a scream. The intruder wasn't just inside the network, it was living in it. It moved without a trace, accessed files without tripping alarms, and covered its tracks with a level of sophistication I had only read about in intelligence reports on state-sponsored actors. "Status, Nolan." Colonel Marks's voice was a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor. He stood behind me, a mountain of a man in a perfectly starched uniform, his presence filling the small room. He smelled faintly of stale coffee and pure, unfiltered authority. "It's a ghost, sir," I said, my eyes never leaving the screen. My fingers flew across the keyboard, executing a series of commands. "It's using a polymorphic string that rewrites its own signature every time we get close to isolating it. It's not just avoiding us, it's learning from our methods. It anticipates our scans and routes around them before they're even complete." "In English, Lieutenant." I took a deep breath. "Sir, the person who built this is more than a hacker. They're an artist. They built a key that changes shape the moment you try to fit it into a lock. We've never seen anything this elegant." "I don't care if it's elegant, I care if it's dangerous," Mark snapped. He pointed a thick finger at a specific monitor displaying a list of encrypted file directories. This morning at 400, it accessed the agent database, specifically Operation Nightshade. That's a list of every undercover operative we have in Eastern Europe. If that list gets out. He didn't need to finish. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't about stolen weapon schematics or financial data anymore. This was about lives, men and women in the field who were depending on us on this windowless room to keep their identities secret. "We've locked down the directory," I assured him, trying to keep my voice steady. "But the logs show the data was exfiltrated, a compressed burst lasting only 1.2 seconds. It's gone." "And find out where it went," he ordered. "I've got the FBI sending a liaison, Agent Miller. He's a pain in the ass, but he's the best they have at digital forensics. I want you to give him your full cooperation. But make no mistake, Nolan, this is Army Cyber Command's mess. You will clean it up. I want a name, I want a location, and I want it yesterday." He turned and walked out, the heavy door hissing shut behind him, leaving me alone with the glowing screens and the weight of his command. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. An artist, that's what I'd called the hacker. It was true. The code was brilliant, a symphony of logic and misdirection. There was a signature style to it, a familiarity I couldn't quite place. It was aggressive yet subtle, complex but ruthlessly efficient. My mind raced through the short list of cyber warfare units from rival nations. Russia's Cozy Bear, China's PLA Unit 61398. It had the technical hallmarks, but the flair, the almost playful arrogance of it felt different. An hour later, Agent Miller arrived. He was exactly as the colonel described him, tall, thin, with a suit that was probably expensive but looked rumpled, and an expression that suggested he'd just swallowed something sour. "Lieutenant Nolan," he said, his handshake brief and firm. "Miller, FBI, let's cut to the chase. What do you have that isn't in the preliminary report?" "We have the malware's core programming," I said, pointing to my main screen. We've managed to quarantine a fragment of it in a sandbox environment. It's a digital chameleon. It doesn't just hide, it mimics the functions of the system processes around it. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand in a hurricane. Miller peered at the code, his eyes narrowing. So you have nothing. I have a trail, I countered, my voice sharper than I intended. A very, very faint one. The exfiltration burst was routed through a series of compromised servers. A university in Brazil, a server farm in Iceland, a public library in Japan. Standard misdirection, but the encryption on the packet itself, it's proprietary, custom-built. Which tells me the creator is paranoid and well-funded, Miller said, unimpressed. Still sounds like a state actor. Maybe, I said, but the code is messy, not sloppy, just unconventional. It breaks established programming rules, but it works. It's like it was written by someone who taught themselves, someone who doesn't think like a formally trained engineer. For the next 8 hours, Miller and I worked in tandem. He brought the FBI's massive resources to bear, cross-referencing the code with their databases of known cyberterrorists. I led my team, a small group of the Army's brightest digital soldiers, in a relentless hunt for the hacker's origin point. We were cyberarchaeologists, digging through layers of digital rock, searching for a single fossil. My phone, stored in a locker outside the SCIF, buzzed for the 4th time. A mandatory break gave me a chance to check it. All 4 calls were from my father's campaign manager. A text message glowed on the screen. Your father needs to speak with you. Urgent, it's about the fundraiser Saturday. I sighed and dialed. He answered on the first ring. Dana, where have you been? Senator Nolan's voice was smooth, polished, the kind of voice that could calm a panicked crowd or sell them a war. Working, Dad? I know, making the country safe, he said, a hint of practiced pride in his tone. Listen, honey, about Saturday, we need you there. Front and center, in uniform. The press will be there. A daughter serving her country, a father serving his state. It's the kind of story that wins elections. Dad, I don't know if I can get away. We have a serious situation here. Everyone has a serious situation, Dana, he said, his voice losing its warmth, replaced by a cool impatience. I need you to make this one a priority, for the family, for the campaign, just a few hours. Smile for the cameras, shake a few hands, and make your father proud. Can you do that for me? I'll try, sir, I said, defaulting to the military response. It was easier than arguing. Good girl, and how's Leo? Is he still locked in his room talking to computers? My stomach clenched. Leo's fine, he's working on his projects. Right, well, try to drag him out into the sunlight sometime. I'll see you Saturday, don't be late. He hung up before I could reply. I put the phone away, the conversation leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. My father saw my uniform not as a symbol of my service, but as a campaign prop. And my younger brother, Leo, he was just an afterthought. A strange, brilliant boy who lived more in the digital world than the real one. Ever since he was a kid, he could make computers do things that seemed like magic. He built his first AI when he was 15. By 17, he was bouncing code off satellites just for fun. He was a digital phantom, a prodigy who saw the entire internet as his personal playground. But he was reclusive, shy, and terrified of our father's booming expectations. Back in the SCIF, the hunt continued. We peeled back the layers of the hacker's onion, one by one. The server in Japan led to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, which led to a series of encrypted cryptocurrency wallets. Each step was a dead end, a perfectly constructed wall. They're toying with us, Miller grumbled, rubbing his tired eyes. Every time we get close, the trail evaporates. No, I whispered, staring at a string of code that had just flashed on my screen. It was a fragment of the data from the final routing node. It was corrupted, a ghost of a ghost, but it was there. It's not a wall, it's a door. He's just hiding the keyhole. My team gathered around my console as I worked. I wasn't just following the trail anymore, I was rebuilding it. Using the corrupted data fragment, I wrote a program to predict the algorithm the hacker had used to create his maze. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary based on a flicker of an echo. For hours, the program ran. The servers hummed, processing trillions of possibilities. Miller paced. My team drank coffee until they were vibrating. I just watched, my entire being focused on that single screen. And then, at 03:17 in the morning, after 36 hours of sustained, mind-breaking effort, we got a hit. A single line of text appeared on the screen. A decrypted IP address, the origin point. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The location of the most dangerous cyber threat the U.S. had faced in a decade. Miller leaned in close, his breath fogging the corner of the monitor. Where is it? Moscow? Beijing? My blood ran cold. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the numbers, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. It wasn't an address in a hostile country. It wasn't a secret server farm in a rogue state. I knew that IP address. I had set it up myself. It was the secure, hardwired internet connection for the custom-built computer in the basement of my family's home. The computer I had built for my brother, Leo. Time seemed to warp, slowing down until each tick of the server clock was a hammer blow against my skull. My training, my entire career, was built on a single, unshakable principle: the integrity of the mission above all else. And the mission was on my screen, clear as day. A flashing cursor next to an IP address that led directly to my 17-year-old brother. "Well," Miller's voice was sharp, cutting through my paralysis. "Don't go into shock on me, Lieutenant. Read me the address." My mind raced, constructing and discarding a dozen scenarios in a microsecond. If I gave him the address, a black-clad FBI SWAT team would be smashing through my father's meticulously manicured hedges before sunrise. They would drag Leo, my quiet, awkward, brilliant brother, out of his basement sanctuary. He'd be labeled a terrorist, a traitor. He would disappear into a federal black site so deep no one would ever hear from him again. I couldn't let that happen. But the alternative, lying to a federal agent during a national security crisis, was an act of treason in itself. My fingers moved before I had a conscious plan. With a few keystrokes, I rerouted the display output, pushing the real IP address to a small, encrypted partition on my local drive. In its place, I fabricated a new string of data. "It's a dead end," I said, my voice shockingly calm. I turned to face him, forcing my expression into one of professional frustration. "It's a spoofed relay terminating at a known honeypot in Cheyenne Mountain, a digital trap. He led us right to it." Miller stared at me, his eyes like chips of flint. He didn't trust me. I could see the suspicion warring with the plausibility of my lie. A hacker this good would absolutely use a honeypot as a final layer of misdirection. "A honeypot?" he repeated slowly, tasting the word. "You're telling me that after all this, we chased him right into a server designed to waste our time? He's not just a hacker, Agent Miller. He's a sadist," I said, building the lie, layering it with details. "He wanted us to get this far. He wanted us to think we'd won, right before slamming the door in our face. The real exfiltration route is probably somewhere in the garbage data he used to build this ghost trail. We're back to square one." He looked from my face to the screen, then back again. I held his gaze, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my spine. This was the most dangerous gamble of my life. "I want to see your data," he said. "All of it, every log, every packet trace." "You'll have it," I said, gesturing to my team's lead analyst, Sergeant Eva Rostova. "Sergeant, package the trace logs for Agent Miller. Redact anything classified above his clearance level. I'm going to brief Colonel Marks." Eva, a sharp woman with a mind like a steel trap and an unwavering loyalty, gave me a quick, questioning look. She knew our systems. She would know in a second that the IP address I'd flagged as a honeypot wasn't one. I gave her the slightest shake of my head, a command that went against every regulation in the book. It said, "Follow my lead, don't ask questions." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded crisply. "Yes, Lieutenant." I walked out of the SCIF and into the sterile, brightly lit hallway, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. I leaned against the cool wall, taking a deep breath of the recycled air. I had just lied to the FBI and given an unlawful order to a subordinate. My career was already over. I just had to decide how much else I was willing to sacrifice. My briefing with Colonel Marks was even worse. He listened in stony silence as I laid out the honeypot theory. His jaw was set so tight I could see the muscles twitching. "So the best and brightest of Army Cyber Command, with the full backing of the FBI, got played," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Sir, the adversary is operating on a level we haven't encountered before," I said, sticking to the script. "His methods are unprecedented, but this has given us new insight into his psychology. His arrogance is a weakness. He'll make a mistake." "He'd better," Mark said, his eyes drilling into me. "Because if another file is stolen from my network, the first head to roll will be yours, Lieutenant. Now get back to work." I walked out of his office, the dismissal feeling like a physical blow. I needed to get home. I needed to see Leo. I feigned a sudden migraine, a plausible excuse after nearly 2 days without sleep, and signed myself out on medical leave for 12 hours. It was a risk, but it was the only way. The drive from Fort Sam Houston to my father's house in the wealthy hills of West Austin was a blur. The Texas heat shimmered off the highway, but I felt cold, frozen from the inside out. My father's world was one of appearances, of carefully managed perceptions. The manicured perfection of the neighborhood, with its sprawling modern houses and lush green lawns, felt like a mockery. It was a beautiful lie, and I was beginning to realize our entire family was built on the same foundation. I parked in the long, curved driveway, the engine of my sensible sedan a rude intrusion in the curated silence. I used my old key to let myself in. The house was quiet, cavernous. Polished marble floors and minimalist art adorned the walls. It didn't feel like a home, it felt like a showroom for a man on his way to the governor's mansion. I went straight to the basement. The door was at the end of a long, carpeted hallway. As I got closer, I could hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard. The sound that had once been a comfort, a sign that my reclusive brother was safe in his digital world, now sounded like a ticking bomb. I opened the door without knocking. "Leo." He jumped, spinning around in his chair. The room was a nest of technology. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting servers, monitors, and strange, custom-built devices I couldn't identify. The only light came from the screens, casting an ethereal blue glow on his pale, startled face. He was thin, with the same dark hair as me, but his eyes were wide and perpetually anxious. He was drowning in a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. "Dana, what are you doing here? I thought you were on base." His voice was a nervous squeak. I closed the door behind me, the click echoing in the sudden silence. I didn't answer. I just walked over to his main console, my eyes scanning the lines of code that filled the screen. It was him. The unconventional style, the arrogant flair, the beautiful, chaotic logic. It was Leo's digital fingerprint, as unique as his DNA. "Operation Nightshade," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "A list of every undercover operative in Eastern Europe. Tell me you didn't do it." His face went white, he visibly shrank in his chair. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Leo." The words ripped out of me, louder and harsher than I intended. The soldier took over, the one trained to interrogate and intimidate. "I traced it, the IP address. It came from this room. From that machine right there. You bypassed the most secure network on the planet, stole a file that will get people killed, and led my team on a 3-day wild goose chase. I need to know why, right now." Tears welled in his eyes. He started trembling. "You can't tell anyone, you can't. It's not what you think." "What I think," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, "is that my 17-year-old brother just committed an act of treason that could start a war. You need to give me a better explanation, or I swear to God, Leo, I will drag you out of this house and deliver you to the FBI myself." He shook his head frantically, the tears now streaming down his face. "I had to, I didn't have a choice." "A choice to do what? To betray your country?" "No," he screamed, his voice cracking. He jumped up from his chair, his hands clenched into fists. "To save him, to save Dad?" I froze, the words hitting me with the force of a physical impact. My anger evaporated, replaced by a profound and terrifying confusion. "What are you talking about? What does Dad have to do with this?" Leo wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pointed a trembling finger at one of his monitors, which was dark. "I didn't steal that list to sell it. I stole it to erase something that was hidden inside it." He typed a frantic series of commands, and the dark screen flickered to life. It was a video file. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 years ago. The image was grainy, clearly from a hidden camera, showing a dimly lit, opulent office. My father, Senator Nolan, was sitting at a desk. Across from him sat another man, his face shadowed. "I didn't do it for them," Leo whispered, his eyes wide with fear as he stared at the screen. "I did it for us, because of what's on this video. Dad didn't create a fake file to frame his rival. It's so much worse than that, Dana. The file I had to erase wasn't fake. It was real. And it proves that our father, he's the one who's a traitor." The video on the screen was silent, the low resolution making the figures swim in a sea of digital noise, but there was no mistaking my father. He looked younger, his face less lined with the stress of his gubernatorial campaign, but the confident, almost regal posture was the same. He was accepting a thick manila envelope from the man in the shadows. There was a handshake, a nod. It looked like 1,000 mundane business deals. "I don't understand," I said, my voice hoarse. "What is this? What does this have to do with Operation Nightshade?" "He didn't frame his opponent, Dana," Leo repeated, his voice trembling as he stared at the screen. "He framed himself." My head was spinning. "Leo, that makes no sense. Start from the beginning. Why did you hack the DoD?" He took a shaky breath, finally tearing his eyes away from the monitor to look at me. "A few weeks ago, I was poking around, on the dark web, just looking. I found a secure data broker site, high-level stuff, political espionage, corporate secrets. They had a new file for auction, advertised as damaging intelligence on a leading Texas gubernatorial candidate. I got curious. I thought maybe it was on Dad's opponent, Marcus Thorne. So you hacked the site? It wasn't hard, he said with a flicker of his usual pride before the fear returned. When I got inside and decrypted the file, it wasn't about Thorne, it was about Dad. It was this video and a ledger. He typed another command and a spreadsheet filled the screen. It was a list of dates, offshore account numbers, and cryptic notes. The man in the video is a known operative for a foreign intelligence service, Leo explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. The ledger details payments. Dad has been selling classified information for years, Dana, ever since he was on the Senate Intelligence Committee. He was feeding them intel in exchange for money to fund his campaigns and other things. I stared at the screen, a wave of nausea washing over me. The dates on the ledger matched my father's trips abroad, his closed-door meetings, his sudden influxes of campaign funding that were always attributed to anonymous donors. It was all there, a detailed, damning record of treason. And the file you erased? I asked, my voice barely audible. That was the proof. The final piece of evidence connecting Dad to the foreign operative. It was hidden inside the Nightshade file, encrypted with a key only the operative knew. It was their insurance policy. If Dad ever tried to back out, they'd release it. But the operative was killed in a drone strike last month. No one knew the file was there, except them. They put it up for auction, not knowing exactly what it was, just that it was connected to Dad. I sank into Leo's spare chair, the world tilting on its axis. My father, Senator Nolan, the man who lectured me about duty, honor, and country, a patriot in public, a traitor in private. The perfectly tailored suits, the impassioned speeches, the hand-over-heart patriotism, all a lie. So you hacked the DoD, I pieced it together, my voice flat, to get to the Nightshade file, find the hidden data, and erase it before anyone else could find it, before the people auctioning it could sell it to the highest bidder. I had to protect him, Leo cried, his face crumpling again. I know what he did was wrong, but he's our father. If this got out, it wouldn't just destroy him. It would destroy all of us. You, me, Mom, everything would be gone, your career would be over, everything we've ever known. I looked at my brother, this terrified, brilliant boy who had just risked everything to hold our broken family together. He hadn't been trying to start a war, he'd been trying to prevent one in our own home. His methods were reckless, catastrophic even, but his motive was a desperate, misguided act of love. Leo, I said, my voice regaining some of its strength. The people you stole from, they don't just give up, they will hunt you. And the government, if they ever find out what you did, they will call it tampering with evidence in a treason investigation. They will bury you. That's why I had to be perfect, he whispered. I made myself a ghost, untraceable. I would have been too if the IP address hadn't led back here. I don't understand how you did that. I routed it through a quantum-encrypted VPN. It should have been impossible. I closed my eyes. He was a genius, but he was self-taught. He didn't have the institutional knowledge I did. You're a phantom, Leo, but you still leave footprints. The army has tools you've never dreamed of. I got lucky. The reality of my own situation crashed down on me. I had lied. I had obstructed a federal investigation. I was now an accessory after the fact to the largest data breach in recent history, all to protect a brother who was trying to cover up the treason of our father. The irony was so bitter it felt like poison. Okay, I said, standing up. The soldier in me was taking over again, not the angry interrogator, but the strategist, the one who assesses a disaster and finds a way through. Here, what's going to happen? You are going to shut everything down, power off every machine in this room. You are not to touch a keyboard until I say so. Is that clear? He nodded, his eyes wide. I need the original file, the video, the ledger. Everything you downloaded from that broker site. I deleted it, wiped the drives clean after I found the hidden data in the DoD file. You're smarter than that, Leo. You always make a backup. He hesitated, then nodded toward a small metallic object on his desk, a solid-state drive, triple encrypted. The password is the first line of the poem Mom used to read to us. The night has 1,000 eyes. The line popped into my head instantly. A memory from a happier, simpler time that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Good, I said, pocketing the drive. Now listen to me. No one can know about this. Not Mom, and especially not Dad. He can't know you saved him. If he knows, he'll use you. He will see you as a tool, and he will keep using you until you break. Do you understand me? He nodded again, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Go to your room, get some sleep. When I get back, we're going to have another conversation about your hobbies. From now on, your playground is closed. He shuffled out of the basement, leaving me alone with the humming machines and the ghost of our family's secret. I stood there for a long time, the weight of the small drive in my pocket feeling heavier than a rucksack full of bricks. I had to protect Leo. That was my primary mission now. But to do that, I had to keep the investigation I was leading from finding him. I had to actively sabotage my own team, my own command, my own country. And I had to do it all while looking my father in the eye at a campaign fundraiser on Saturday, smiling for the cameras as if our whole world wasn't a lie. I drove back to base in a daze. The lie I'd told Miller and Marks now had to become the truth. I had to create a phantom, a plausible ghost for them to chase, to keep them from ever looking in the one direction I knew the truth was. When I walked back into the SCIF, Eva Rostova pulled me aside. Her dark eyes were full of concern. "Lieutenant, the trace logs I packaged for the FBI, I had to build a recursive loop to mask the final IP destination. It was a dirty fix. If they analyze the raw data too closely, they'll see it. They'll know you falsified the report. It just has to hold them for a little while, Sergeant," I said, my voice low. "I need a new trail. I need you to help me build one." Her loyalty was to the uniform, to the mission. I was asking her to betray both. I was asking her to trust me, even though I couldn't tell her why. She studied my face for a long moment. I braced myself for her to refuse to report me to the colonel. It's what she should have done. "Who are we hunting?" she asked instead. The question was a test. She wasn't asking for a name. She was asking for a profile, a story, a lie plausible enough for her to believe in. "We're hunting a freelancer," I said, the new narrative taking shape in my mind. "A former intelligence contractor, someone who knows our systems because he helped build them, someone with a grudge. He's not working for a foreign power, he's working for himself. He's trying to sell the list to the highest bidder, and he's using all this patriotic smoke and mirrors to cover his tracks." Eva nodded slowly, her analytical mind already processing the new parameters. A ghost with a history. "I can work with that. It's better than chasing a state actor. It gives us a motive we can trace, financial records, known associates." "Exactly," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. She was in. She was going to help me. Let's build our ghost. For the rest of the day, we worked. We fabricated a suspect profile, codenamed Janus. We created a digital backstory, planting false evidence deep in archived server logs, creating a trail of breadcrumbs so compelling that even I started to believe it. It was the most intricate, dangerous lie I had ever conceived. We were creating a ghost to hunt, a fiction to distract from the horrifying truth. And with every line of code we wrote, I was digging myself deeper into a hole from which I knew I could never escape. Building a ghost is a delicate art. You can't simply invent a person out of thin air. The digital world has a memory, and a fabrication with no history will collapse under the slightest scrutiny. So, Eva and I became digital resurrectionists. Our ghost needed a body, a real person whose life we could co-opt. We found him in the archives of a defunct defense contractor that had been absorbed by a larger firm a decade ago. His name was Arthur Finch. He was a brilliant network engineer who had worked on the initial architecture of the very system Leo had breached. He'd been a freelancer, a known maverick, and most importantly, he had died in a single-car accident 4 years ago. He had no living family. He was a perfect vessel. Finch had a reputation for being paranoid, Eva murmured, her eyes scanning his old personnel file on her screen. He argued with his project managers constantly. Claimed the security protocols were full of holes that only he knew how to patch. He was fired 2 months before the project went live. "A grudge," I said, the narrative thread strengthening. "That's our motive. He felt the system was his, that he was pushed out, and now he's proving he was right all along by tearing it down." "It's plausible," Eva agreed. He was also a big player in the early crypto scene. He wrote articles under a pseudonym, Daedalus. "If we can link Daedalus's old crypto wallets to a modern exchange, then we can create a financial trail," I finished. "A trail that shows our ghost, Janus, is using Finch's old digital footprint to launder money from selling government secrets." We worked with a feverish intensity. Eva, with her surgical precision, began planting the seeds. She unearthed old forum posts from Daedalus and subtly altered their metadata, linking them to servers we knew Janus had used. She resurrected a dormant crypto wallet, registered to Finch, and performed a series of microtransactions, creating the illusion of recent activity. My job was to handle the network side. I created a ghost packet, a piece of data designed to look like it came from Janus, and buried it deep within the junk data of the Cheyenne Mountain honeypot. It was a single, elegant string of code that, when decrypted, would reveal a fragment of Arthur Finch's old contractor ID number. It was the breadcrumb, the clue I would miraculously discover that would lead the entire investigation down the path we were creating. It was high-risk, high-level deception. We were altering evidence, fabricating intelligence, and steering a multi-agency investigation away from a traitorous senator and toward a dead man. Every keystroke was a felony. We were just finishing the initial fabrication when Agent Miller walked back into the SCIF. He held a tablet in his hand, and he was not smiling. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice flat, "I've been going over your trace logs, the ones your sergeant so helpfully packaged for me." He tapped the screen. "There's a recursive loop in the final data hop to the Cheyenne Mountain server, an elegant little piece of code designed to mask something. It's the kind of thing a programmer uses to hide a flaw or, in this case, a lie. You want to tell me what you're hiding, Nolan?" My team fell silent. Eva froze, her hands hovering over her keyboard. My blood turned to ice, but my face remained impassive. I had anticipated this. Miller was too good to miss Eva's dirty fix. I stood up and walked over to the main display. "You're right, Agent Miller, it's a mask, but I wasn't hiding a lie. I was containing a threat." I typed a command, and a complex diagram of the honeypot's internal network appeared. When the hacker, Janus, realized we were tracing him, he didn't just slam a door, he left a parting gift, a logic bomb. It was buried in the data packet that led us to the honeypot. The recursive loop you found wasn't to mask the IP, it was a containment field I wrote on the fly to isolate the bomb's trigger before it could wipe the entire server, including the logs of our investigation. I was preserving the evidence, Agent, not hiding it. I pointed to a quarantined section of the diagram, a section I had created only an hour ago for this exact contingency. "The bomb is right there. My team is currently working on disarming it." Miller stared at the screen, then at me. He was caught between his suspicion of me and my technically superior, albeit completely fabricated, explanation. To question my story further would be to admit he didn't fully understand the nature of the threat he was supposed to be investigating. "If you had a logic bomb, it should have been in your official report," he said, his voice clipped. "I was in the middle of a live threat mitigation, Agent," I shot back, pressing my advantage. "I prioritized action over paperwork. I'm sure a man of your experience can appreciate that." He gave a curt nod, his suspicion unabated but his argument defanged. "Fine, keep me updated, on everything." He turned to go, then paused. "By the way, we've got a hit on the proprietary encryption. A university in Zurich was working on a similar theoretical model a few years back. The project was led by a visiting professor, a man named Arthur Finch. He dropped the name like a grenade and walked out. I turned to Eva, my heart pounding. Our lie was working. Miller, in his own separate investigation, had stumbled upon one of the real-life seeds we were using for our fabrication. He thought he had found the trail himself. He would pursue it with the full force of the FBI, never suspecting we were the ones leading him by the nose. "That was too close," Eva whispered, letting out a breath she seemed to have been holding for the entire exchange. "It means we're on the right track," I said. "Now, let's find that breadcrumb." The next 12 hours were a performance. I discovered the ghost packet. I decrypted the fragment of Finch's ID. I presented my findings to Colonel Marks, who was relieved to finally have a tangible suspect to report up the chain of command. The hunt for Janus, the ghost we had created, was now the official focus of the entire investigation. We were no longer chasing Leo, we were chasing Arthur Finch. I finally left the base late Friday afternoon, the exhaustion a heavy cloak on my shoulders. As I got into my car, my phone rang. It was my mother, Eleanor Nolan. "Dana, darling." Her voice was a smooth, melodic southern drawl. "I was just calling to make sure you have your uniform ready for tomorrow night. Your father is so looking forward to having you there." "It's ready, Mom," I said, rubbing my temples. "Wonderful, and you'll be bringing a guest, I hope? There's a lovely young man from the Attorney General's office who is just dying to meet you." "I'll be coming alone," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "And I'll probably have to leave early." "Oh, darling, don't be like that," she chided gently. "It's one night. For your father, you know how important this is. Everything has to be perfect." Perfect? The word echoed in my mind. The perfect house, the perfect career, the perfect family, a flawless facade hiding a rotten core. "And have you spoken to Leo? He hasn't come out of the basement in 2 days. I leave food by the door. I'm worried about him." "He's fine, Mom, just focused on a project." The lie came easily now. I had been lying to everyone for the past 48 hours. What was one more? Well, at least try to get him to come upstairs for the party. It doesn't look right, having him hidden away like some sort of secret. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. I'll talk to him, I said, my voice colder than I intended. I have to go, Mom. I hung up, the conversation leaving me feeling empty. My mother wasn't a bad person. She was just willfully blind. She had chosen to live on the surface of our lives, to ignore the dark currents running beneath, to focus only on maintaining the illusion of perfection. I wondered, not for the first time, how much she really knew about my father's business. I spent the night in my small, sterile off-base apartment. It was the complete opposite of my father's house, functional, unadorned, honest. I meticulously prepared my Army service uniform. The dark blue jacket, the perfectly creased trousers, the polished brass and gleaming metals. Each element was a symbol of the oath I had taken. An oath to defend my country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As I polished the eagle insignia on my cap, I caught my reflection in the brass. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were tired, haunted. She was a soldier, a liar, a protector, a traitor. She was going to a party to celebrate the man she was tasked with hunting, to stand by his side in her uniform and become the ultimate symbol of his deception. The enemy wasn't a ghost in the machine anymore. He was my father. And tomorrow night, I was walking straight into the heart of his command center. The Nolan residence on a Saturday night was a different world. The cold, minimalist showroom I'd walked through a few days ago had been transformed. Soft lighting warmed the marble floors. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through a crowd of Texas's most powerful people, offering champagne and canapés. A string quartet played softly in the corner. This wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a display of power, a coronation in waiting. I stood in the grand entryway, the formal wool of my uniform feeling stiff and alien in the sea of designer dresses and bespoke suits. Every head turned as I entered. They weren't seeing Dana Nolan, they were seeing the uniform. They saw the daughter, the soldier, the perfect campaign accessory my father had ordered. A ripple of polite applause followed me as I made my way through the room, the whispers trailing in my wake. That's his daughter, a lieutenant, such a beautiful family. My father detached himself from a circle of oil executives and strode toward me, his arms outstretched. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He radiated a charisma that was almost a physical force. It was the same charisma that had won him elections, and I now knew charmed foreign agents. "There she is," he boomed, his voice full of manufactured pride. He wrapped me in a hug, his hand clapping my shoulder in a way that was both paternal and proprietary. "My hero, doesn't she look magnificent?" he said to the crowd, not to me. "Sir," I said, my voice a quiet, formal counterpoint to his boisterous performance. "None of that sir nonsense tonight, Dana. Tonight you're my daughter," he said, his smile never reaching his cold, calculating eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The photographers are by the fireplace. Let's give them the shot they came for." He guided me through the throng, his hand firmly on my back. I felt like a puppet, my strings being pulled by the man I was supposed to be protecting my brother from. We posed by the massive limestone fireplace. He put his arm around me, beaming for the cameras. I managed a tight, disciplined smile. The flashbulbs popped, capturing the perfect lie for the front page of tomorrow's paper, the patriotic senator and his devoted soldier daughter. As soon as the photographers were satisfied, he released me. "Mingle," he commanded softly. "Be charming. Remind these people what our family stands for." He then turned and was immediately swallowed by a group of lobbyists. I moved through the room on autopilot, shaking hands, accepting praise for my service, and feeling like a complete imposter. These people, with their easy smiles and expensive jewelry, were funding my father's ambition. I wondered how many of them knew the real source of the Nolan family's political power. I found my mother near the string quartet, holding court with a group of senators' wives. She was elegant in a silk gown, her smile as bright and brittle as the diamond necklace she wore. "Dana, darling, there you are," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "Doesn't she look wonderful, ladies? We are just so proud." The women cooed their approval. I endured their fawning questions about my brave work, giving them vague, sanitized answers that revealed nothing. As they moved on to gossip about a rival campaign, my mother leaned in. "Have you seen Leo?" she whispered, her smile faltering for a second. I begged him to come up just for an hour. "I haven't seen him, Mom," I said. Just then, I felt a tug on my sleeve. I turned to see Leo standing behind me. He looked painfully out of place, like a ghost who had wandered into the wrong party. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and slacks that looked like they hadn't been worn in years. His hair was a mess, and his eyes darted around the room, wide with anxiety. "Leo," my mother gasped, her relief quickly turning to disapproval. "Oh, darling, your shirt, well, never mind, I'm just so glad you came up. Now go say hello to your father." "No," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't look at her, he was looking at me. "I came to talk to Dana." He pulled me away from the crowd, toward the relative quiet of the glass doors that led to the patio. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "Have they found anything?" "They're chasing a ghost," I told him. "A dead man. We're safe for now, but you shouldn't be up here, you need to go back downstairs." "I had to," he said, wringing his hands. "Dad, he came down to the basement earlier. He never does that. He was asking questions about my projects, about my security software. He wanted to know how secure my network was. He was acting weird, Dana, scared." A chill went down my spine. Had my father somehow found out what Leo did? Or was he just getting paranoid, feeling the walls close in? Before I could answer, a new voice cut in, sharp and authoritative. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour." We turned. Marcus Thorne, my father's chief political rival, was standing there. Thorne was a former federal prosecutor, a man with a reputation for being ruthless, intelligent, and impeccably honest. He was everything my father pretended to be. He was also losing in the polls. "Senator Thorne," I said, my voice neutral. "Lieutenant," he said, nodding to me with genuine respect before his eyes settled on my father, who was now approaching them, his smile fixed in place. "Daniel, quite the party. You're celebrating early, aren't you?" "Just giving my supporters a chance to be part of a winning team, Marcus," my father replied smoothly. "You should try it sometime." Thorne ignored the jibe. His gaze shifted to me. "Lieutenant, I read a report this morning. A major cyber attack on the DoD. Details are scarce, but it sounds serious. I trust our people are handling it?" It was a casual question, but it felt like an accusation. He was baiting my father, testing him. I saw a flicker of something in my father's eyes, not quite fear, but a deep primal caution. "Our nation's cyber defenses are the best in the world," I said, delivering the official, meaningless line. "The situation is under control." Thorne's eyes held mine for a moment longer than was comfortable. It was the look of a prosecutor who knows a witness is lying. "I'm glad to hear it," he said, before giving my father a thin smile. "Enjoy your party, Daniel. These things have a way of not lasting." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. My father watched him go, his jaw tight. "Arrogant bastard," he muttered. He turned to me, his affable party host mask back in place, but his eyes were hard. "What have you heard about this DoD breach? Is it contained?" "It's an ongoing investigation, Dad," I said carefully. "It's classified." "I have top-secret clearance, Dana," he snapped, his voice a low command. "Tell me what you know." He wasn't just curious, he was fishing. He was trying to find out if the breach was connected to him, if his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. "The leading suspect is a former contractor named Arthur Finch," I said, feeding him the lie we had built. "He's a freelancer with a grudge. It's a mercenary hack, not a state-sponsored one." I watched his face closely for any reaction. He relaxed, but only slightly. A wave of relief washed over his features, so subtle that only someone who had studied him their whole life could have seen it. He thought he was in the clear. He didn't know that the real threat wasn't the hacker, but his own son, standing right next to us. "Good," he said, patting my arm. "Good work, keep me informed." He then turned his attention to Leo, his expression shifting to one of mild annoyance. "Leo, you came out of your cave. Straighten your shirt, you're embarrassing your mother." Leo flinched as if struck. He mumbled an apology and practically fled, scurrying back toward the hallway that led to the basement. I watched him go, a fresh wave of anger at my father rising in my throat. He had just been saved from ruin by that boy, and all he could offer was a casual, cruel dismissal. I spent another hour playing my part, but my mind was elsewhere. The encounter with Thorne had rattled me. He knew something, or at least he suspected it. And my father's reaction had confirmed my worst fears. He wasn't just a traitor, he was a coward, terrified of being exposed. I was making my way toward the exit when a man I didn't recognize stepped into my path. He was older, with a military bearing and eyes that had seen too much. "Lieutenant Nolan," he said. "I'm General Peters, retired. I served with your father on the Intelligence Committee." "An honor to meet you, sir," I said, shaking his hand. "Your father is a great man," he said, his voice quiet. "A true patriot, but a man in his position makes enemies, powerful ones. Tell me, Lieutenant, this business with Marcus Thorne, this new evidence he claims to have, is it credible? I'm not privy to the details of the campaign, General, I said. Of course not, he said, his eyes studying me intently. You just watch your back, Lieutenant. Politics is a dirtier war than any you'll fight overseas. And sometimes, the biggest threats come from the places you least expect. He gave me a final, meaningful nod and walked away. I left the party feeling more trapped than ever. The web was more complex than I had imagined. Thorne, the mysterious General Peters, my paranoid father, my terrified brother, they were all pieces in a puzzle I couldn't see the shape of. I drove back to my apartment, the General's warning echoing in my ears. As I walked into my living room, I stopped dead. The room had been tossed. Not violently, but with a cold, professional efficiency. Cushions were out of place, books were pulled from shelves, drawers were slightly ajar. Someone had been here. Someone who knew how to search a place without leaving a mess. My hand went to the small of my back, where a service weapon would be if I were carrying one. My heart hammered in my chest. I did a slow, methodical sweep of the apartment. No one was here now, but they had been. I knew they hadn't found what they were looking for. I had the solid-state drive with me, it never left my side, but the message was clear. Someone knew I was involved. Someone was hunting me, and they were getting closer. The ghost we had built to distract the hunters was working, but now there was a new hunter in the game, and they were hunting me. The professional, almost sterile nature of the search was more terrifying than a violent ransacking. This wasn't a common burglar. This was someone with training. They weren't looking for valuables, they were looking for information. My apartment was a dead end for them. I kept nothing of importance here for this exact reason, but the invasion of my personal space was a calculated message. We can get to you. We are watching. My first instinct was to call it in to report the break-in. But who would I call? The local police? The FBI? I could just imagine Agent Miller's smug, suspicious face. A break-in at the lead investigator's apartment just as the case was developing a solid lead? He would see it as proof of my complicity, not my victimhood. I was on my own. My mind raced. Who knew enough to target me? It wasn't my own team. My loyalty to Eva was absolute, and hers to me was my only lifeline. It was Miller. A back-channel search was his style, not a black bag job. This felt different. More clinical. It felt like intelligence work. Could it be the foreign agency my father had sold secrets to? Were they trying to clean up loose ends, to retrieve the data Leo had stolen from them before he erased it? Or was it someone else? General Peters's warning at the party echoed in my head. The biggest threats come from the places you least expect. Could it be a domestic player? Someone connected to the campaign? To Thorne? I spent the rest of the night awake, sitting in the dark, the solid-state drive clutched in my hand. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was a cyber warfare officer, trained to fight battles on a digital plane. This was a physical threat, a violation of my sanctuary, and it left me feeling exposed in a way no network breach ever could. The next morning, I walked back into the SCIF with a newfound, cold resolve. My fear had crystallized into anger. Someone was hunting my family, and they were using me as the trail. I was done being reactive. It was time to go on the offensive. "Sergeant," I said, my voice low and sharp as I approached Eva's station. "I need a new line of inquiry, off the official record, for my eyes only." Eva looked up, her expression serious. She could see the change in me. She didn't ask why, she just nodded. "What are we looking for, Lieutenant?" "Communications. I want to see everything coming in and out of Senator Thorne's campaign headquarters. Encrypted emails, text messages, burner phone activity, everything." "That's highly illegal, ma'am," she said, her voice a careful whisper. "That's domestic surveillance on a political campaign. If we're caught, we won't be," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Build a clean access point. Use a zero-day exploit in their commercial server software. Route it through a proxy chain that looks like it's originating from our ghost, Janus. If anyone finds the intrusion, it will look like our suspect is trying to gather blackmail material on my father's opponent. It will strengthen our official case." Eva's eyes widened slightly as she understood the deadly elegance of the plan. We would use our own fabricated investigation as cover for a completely illegal, off-the-books one. She gave a curt nod. "I'll need a few hours to build the exploit." While Eva worked her magic, I turned my attention to another target, my own family. I couldn't put a physical tail on my father, but I could watch him digitally. With a heavy heart, I began to build a profile of my father's digital life. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, using my skills to spy on my own parent, but his actions had left me no choice. I was no longer just his daughter. I was the investigator of his treason. Agent Miller came in mid-morning, looking energized for the first time since I'd met him. "We're making progress," he announced, directing his words to the room but his gaze at me. "The FBI's Zurich office is confirming Arthur Finch's tenure at the university. They've also flagged several of his known associates for questioning. We're shaking the trees. Something will fall out." "Good to hear, Agent," I said, my voice a perfect mask of professional interest. "We're currently analyzing Janus's coding style, trying to build a behavioral profile that might predict his next move." "Keep me posted," he said, then he lowered his voice. "By the way, I heard about the break-in at your apartment." My blood ran cold. "How?" "I have friends in the Austin PD. A silent alarm was tripped at your building, but the responding officers reported no signs of forced entry and you weren't home. They logged it as a false alarm. But I find it a strange coincidence, don't you?" His eyes were full of suspicion. He didn't know what was going on, but he knew I was at the center of it. "As you said, Agent, a coincidence," I replied coolly, turning back to my screen to signal the end of the conversation. By late afternoon, Eva had a breakthrough. "I'm in," she whispered, her face illuminated by the glow of her monitor. "I've got access to the Thorn campaign's internal server. What do you see?" "Standard campaign traffic," she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Fundraising emails, polling data, press releases, wait." She stopped. "There's a hidden partition. Heavily encrypted. I'm trying to access it now." For the next hour, I stood behind her, watching as she bypassed layer after layer of security. Finally, a single file appeared on the screen. It was an audio file. The file name was just a string of random numbers. Eva rerouted the audio to a secure, localized speaker so only we could hear. She pressed play. A voice filled the small space around her console. It was Marcus Thorne's voice, clear and distinct. "The source is confirmed," Thorne said. "The asset is in place. He's feeding us everything. The senator's financials, his private schedules, even his medical records. It's all dirty." Another voice, one I didn't recognize, replied, "Is it enough? The polls are still against us." "It's not enough to win," Thorne's voice was cold. "But it's enough to wound him. We leak the financials next week. Anonymous tip to the press. Paint him as corrupt. Then, when he's on the defensive, we hit him with the kill shot." "And you're sure the kill shot is real?" There was a pause. Then Thorne's voice returned, laced with grim satisfaction. "I've seen the proof myself. Our source inside the Nolan family is impeccable. Senator Nolan is a traitor, and we're going to prove it." Eva and I looked at each other, our faces pale. A source inside the Nolan family. Thorne had a mole. Someone was feeding him information. Was it my mother? Unlikely. She was too dedicated to the family's public image. Was it a staff member? Housekeeper? Or was it the same person who had searched my apartment? Eva kept digging. She cross-referenced the audio file's metadata with employee access logs. The file had been created by Thorne's campaign manager, a man named David Chen. But it had been last accessed, just hours ago, by a low-level intern. An intern who, according to his resume, was a computer science major at UT Austin. An intern who had a digital footprint that was almost non-existent before 6 months ago. "Give me facial recognition on the intern's staff ID photo," I ordered. Eva ran the program, cross-referencing the photo with a dozen databases. After a few moments, a match popped up. My stomach dropped. The intern wasn't an intern. He was a former CIA operative, a specialist in signals intelligence and human asset recruitment. His name was Michael Shaw, and according to his file, he was a ghost, a deniable operator who officially didn't exist. Thorne wasn't just running a political campaign. He was running an intelligence operation against my father. He wasn't waiting for the law to catch up to him. He was taking him down himself. And he had a professional spook on his payroll to do the dirty work. It was almost certainly Shaw who had tossed my apartment. "Ma'am," Eva said, her voice tense. "I've isolated a series of encrypted communications between Chen, the campaign manager, and an unknown contact. The contact is using a military-grade encryption protocol. It's one of ours." "Trace it," I commanded, my heart pounding. Eva's fingers blurred across the keyboard. The trace was difficult, bouncing through layers of security. But the source wasn't a foreign agent or a political operative. The signal was originating from a secure, military-issued satellite phone. A phone whose serial number was registered to the Department of Defense. A phone that was assigned to Colonel Robert Marks. I stared at the screen, the name pulsing with a malevolent green light. My commanding officer. The man who had put me in charge of this investigation. He was Thorne's mole. He was the source inside the military, feeding a political campaign the information it needed to destroy my father. He had been playing me from the very beginning. He hadn't put me on the case because I was the best. He'd put me on the case because I was Nolan's daughter. He knew the investigation would eventually lead to my family, and he wanted me to be the one to pull the trigger. He wanted me to be the one to expose my own father. The revelation crashed over me with the force of a physical blow. I stumbled back from Eva's console, my hand gripping a server rack for support. Colonel Marks, my mentor, the man whose respect I had worked tirelessly to earn. He wasn't just my commanding officer, he was the architect of my personal hell. Every interaction I'd had with him over the past few days replayed in my mind, now cast in a sinister new light. His initial anger, his pressure to find a suspect, his convenient acceptance of our fabricated ghost, Janus. It was all a calculated performance. He wasn't trying to solve the breach. He was trying to control it. He was steering the investigation from the inside, ensuring it led exactly where he wanted it to go. And his target was me. He'd placed me in an impossible position, a loyalty trap. If I pursued the truth, I would be forced to expose my own father, validating Thorne's political attack and ending my career in the ensuing scandal. If I failed, if I covered it up, he could expose me for obstructing justice, achieving the same result. I was his pawn, his perfect weapon to use against the Nolan family. "Ma'am," Eva's voice was a low, worried murmur. "What are your orders?" I looked at her, my mind racing. I was surrounded. Miller and the FBI were on one side, chasing a ghost I'd created. Thorne and his CIA spook were on another, running their own shadow war. And my own commander was a traitor, manipulating the entire investigation for political gain. I was standing in the middle of a minefield, and every direction was a fatal misstep. "We pull back," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Shut down the access point to Thorne's server. Wipe our tracks. As of this moment, this line of inquiry never happened." "That understood?" "Yes, Lieutenant," she said, her fingers already flying, erasing any trace of our illegal surveillance. She knew, without me having to say it, that we had just stumbled into a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple data breach. "And the data on Colonel Marks," I continued, my voice hardening. "Package it, encrypt it, store it on a secure, isolated drive. No copies, no network access. It's our insurance policy." For the rest of the day, I went through the motions. I sat in briefings, analyzed data streams related to our phantom suspect, and wrote reports that were masterpieces of fiction. All the while, I was acutely aware of Colonel Marks watching me. His demeanor hadn't changed. He was still the same demanding, authoritative commander. But now, when I looked at him, I didn't see a leader. I saw a puppeteer, and I could feel the strings around my limbs. I needed to know why. What was his motive? Was it purely political? Did he believe Thorne was the better man for the state? Or was it something more personal? A grudge against my father from their time together on the Intelligence Committee? That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't risk it. I knew Shaw, Thorne's operative, would be watching. I slept on a cot in a secure communications vault on the base, the encrypted drive with the evidence against Marks tucked under my pillow. Sleep didn't come. I just lay there in the humming darkness, trying to find a path through the wreckage of my life. My only leverage was the truth, all of it. I had the evidence of my father's treason on the drive Leo had given me. I had the evidence of Thorne's illegal domestic spying. And now, I had the evidence of Colonel Marks's betrayal. I was holding 3 bombs, and I knew that if one went off, it would likely detonate the other 2, with me at the epicenter of the blast. The next morning, I received an encrypted summons. Colonel Marks wanted to see me, in his office, alone. I walked the long, sterile hallway to his office, my boots echoing with a grim finality. This was it. He knew I was onto him. This was either going to be an interrogation or an ultimatum. I stood before his desk, my back straight, my expression a carefully constructed mask of military discipline. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and appraising. "Close the door, Lieutenant," he said. I did. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing us in. "You've been busy, Nolan," he said, his voice deceptively calm. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit." I remained standing. "I'd prefer to stand, sir." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Suit yourself. I've been reviewing your team's progress on the Janus case. Your work has been exemplary. You've built a solid, compelling case against Arthur Finch. The FBI is completely convinced. They're preparing to issue a posthumous warrant and close the case, attributing the breach to a deceased, disgruntled contractor." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "It's a neat, tidy solution. It puts the public's mind at ease, it closes the book on a major national security failure, and it avoids any unnecessary political complications. Is that what this is about, sir? I asked, my voice as cold as his. Avoiding political complications? He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished surface of his desk. This is about the greater good, Lieutenant. Your father, Daniel Nolan, is a cancer. A corrupt politician who has been selling this country's secrets for personal gain for over a decade. He is a threat to national security. Marcus Thorne is a good man, an honorable man, who can and will lead this state with integrity. The ends, in this case, absolutely justify the means. And the means include using a serving military officer and her team to run a political smear campaign? I countered, my anger beginning to fray the edges of my discipline. The means include betraying your oath, your uniform, and your subordinates. My oath, he said, his voice rising, is to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Your father is a domestic enemy, and you, Lieutenant, helped prove it. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin file. He slid it across the desk toward me. I know about your brother, Dana. I know he was the one who breached the network. I know you falsified your initial report to protect him. I know you've been obstructing a federal investigation from day one. My blood ran cold. He knew everything. How? The word was a choked whisper. You're a brilliant cyber officer, Nolan, one of the best, but you're still an amateur when it comes to tradecraft. The moment you flagged that IP as a honeypot, I knew you were lying. I have my own backdoors into this facility's systems. I've been monitoring your team's real-time data since this investigation began. I saw the real IP address. I saw you build your ghost. I've watched every move you've made. He leaned back in his chair, a look of grim triumph on his face. You did exactly what I knew you would do. You chose family over country. You chose to protect your brother. And in doing so, you handed me the only weapon I need to take your father down for good. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling base. Here, what's going to happen? The Janus investigation will be officially closed. You will receive a commendation for your excellent work. And then you will take the evidence your brother found, the video, the ledger, and you will anonymously leak it to the press. You will expose your father for the traitor he is. And if I refuse? He turned to face me, his expression hardening into granite. If you refuse, I will release this file. It contains the full, unredacted data from your investigation. It proves your brother's guilt and your subsequent cover-up. He'll be charged under the Espionage Act. He's a civilian, a minor, but that won't matter. He'll spend the rest of his life in a supermax prison. You will be court-martialed and dishonorably discharged, and you will spend the next 20 years in Leavenworth. Your mother's life will be ruined. Your family's name will be synonymous with treason for generations. Is that the legacy you want? It was a perfect trap. He had thought of everything. He had turned my own actions, my own desperate attempts to protect my family, into the very tool of their destruction. I stood there in the silent office, the weight of his ultimatum pressing down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. He was right. I had chosen my family. I had tried to protect them. But in my frantic efforts to contain one fire, I had inadvertently lit a dozen others. You're a monster, I whispered. I'm a patriot, Lieutenant, he corrected me, his voice devoid of any emotion. And so are you. You just need to decide which country you're willing to sacrifice for, the one your father betrayed or the one you swore an oath to defend. He walked back to his desk and sat down. You have 24 hours to make the right choice, Dana. Don't disappoint me. I turned, my body feeling heavy, my uniform a leaden shroud. I walked to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. I had one day to decide whose life I was going to destroy, my father's or my brother and my own. There was no third option. There was no way out. I walked out of Colonel Marks's office and into the sterile hallway, but I wasn't in the base anymore. I was adrift, floating in a cold, silent void. His words echoed in my mind, a perfect, inescapable cage of logic. He had me, he had my father, he had Leo. He held the strings to my entire world and he was about to set it on fire, forcing me to choose who burned. 24 hours. My training kicked in, a shield against the overwhelming panic. A soldier doesn't panic. A soldier analyzes the threat, identifies resources, and formulates a plan of action. But my threat wasn't a piece of malware or a hostile network. My threat was a complex web of betrayal with my own family at its core. I didn't go back to the SCIF. I couldn't face Eva. I couldn't face the ghost we had built, a lie that had now become my prison. I drove off the base, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I had no destination. I just drove, the Texas landscape blurring past my window, a meaningless backdrop to the war raging in my head. Leak the evidence against my father. Expose him as a traitor. In doing so, I would validate Thorne's campaign, making Marx's political maneuvering a success. I would be a pariah in my own family, the daughter who sent her own father to prison. My mother would be destroyed, but Leo and I would be safe. Marx would bury the evidence of our crimes. We would be compromised, owned by him, but we would be free. Or refuse. Let Marx release his file. My father might escape justice for his treason, at least for a while, but Leo would be sacrificed. A 17-year-old boy, my brother, thrown to the wolves for a crime he committed out of a misguided sense of love. And my own life, my career, my identity, everything I had built since I left home, would be incinerated on the altar of my father's sins. There was no right choice. There was only a choice of which betrayal I was willing to live with. Betray my father or betray my brother. Betray my family or betray my oath. I found myself parked by the side of a dusty, forgotten road, the sun beating down on the hood of my car. I pulled out the two solid-state drives. One, the evidence of my father's treason. The other, the evidence of Marx's conspiracy. Each was a digital bomb. An idea began to form in my mind. A wild, desperate, and incredibly dangerous idea. Marx had built a perfect trap with two doors. But what if there was a third? What if I didn't play his game? Marx, Thorne, my father. They were all players in a dirty war, each using the levers of power and information to destroy the other. They thought I was a pawn. But a pawn that reaches the other side of the board can become a queen. I made a call. Leo, it's me. I need your help, and I need you to be brave, braver than you've ever been. I drove back to the house, not to the grand front entrance, but to a small, discreet service door at the back. I found Leo in the basement, looking pale and terrified, surrounded by his silent, sleeping machines. They know, I said, my voice flat. I didn't have time to soften the blow. Not just about Dad. They know about you. They know about me. We're being blackmailed. I laid out the entire situation for him. Marx's betrayal, Thorne's shadow campaign, the ultimatum. I watched his face as the full scope of the disaster washed over him. The fear in his eyes was profound, but as I spoke, something else began to surface. The terror was being replaced by a focused, analytical calm. It was the same look I got when I was deep inside a network, hunting a threat. He was in his element now. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a problem, a complex system of threats and variables that needed to be solved. He's using a standard blackmail protocol, Leo said, his voice quiet but steady. Presents two unacceptable outcomes to force his desired result. The flaw is that he assumes we will choose one of them. He doesn't account for a third variable. I am the third variable, I said. And so are you. He thinks you're just a kid who got lucky. He thinks I'm just a soldier who will follow orders or break. They're all underestimating us. That's our only advantage. What's the plan? He asked. We're going to build a cage, I said. A digital one. Marx gave me 24 hours. We're going to use that time to link all of them, Marx, Thorne, and Dad, together in an inescapable web of their own making. We're going to create a situation of mutually assured destruction. For the next several hours, the basement became our war room. Leo brought his systems back online, his fingers flying across the keyboards with a speed and confidence that was breathtaking. He was no longer a scared kid. He was a master of his craft, a digital phantom moving through the darkest corners of the web. Our plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was targeting Thorne. Thorne is running an illegal surveillance op on a U.S. citizen, a senator, I explained. That's a felony. His CIA spook, Shaw, is a deniable asset. If he's exposed, the agency will disavow him, but the trail will still lead back to Thorne's campaign. We need to find that trail. Leo dove into the campaign's servers, not with the brute force of his previous hack, but with a surgeon's subtlety. He found what we were looking for, a series of encrypted payments from a campaign slush fund to an offshore account. An account that Leo, through a brilliant series of network leaps, traced to a shell corporation registered to Michael Shaw. Got it, Leo said, a grim smile on his face. Proof of payment. Thorne is funding a rogue intelligence operation against a political rival. That's career-ending, maybe even jail time. Phase 2 was my father. Dad's treason is the core of all this, I said. But leaking it ourselves, as Marx wants, puts the weapon in his hands. We need to weaponize it for ourselves. I took the drive with my father's secrets and, with Leo's help, embedded the video and ledger files into a seemingly innocuous piece of data. We then uploaded that data to a secure, neutral server in Switzerland, a digital dead man's switch. We programmed it to release the files to a curated list of every major news outlet in the world, as well as to the Department of Justice, in exactly 22 hours, 2 hours before Marx's deadline expired. The only way to stop the release was a complex, multi-factor key that only Leo and I possessed. Phase 3 was Marx. This was the most dangerous part. We had the recording of him communicating with Thorne's campaign, but it was circumstantial. We needed something more. Something undeniable. I need to talk to him again, I said. I need to get him to admit on tape what he's doing, his ultimatum, the whole plan. He'll never do it in his office, Leo said. It's swept for bugs daily. I know, I said. It won't be in his office, it will be on my terms. I looked at my watch. We had less than a day. I sent a single encrypted text to Colonel Marx from a burner phone. I've made my decision, I need to see you. There are complications. Neutral ground. The old iron bridge, Canyon Lake, sunset. It was a risk. He could refuse, he could bring a team, or he could see it for what it was, a subordinate in crisis, seeking guidance from her commander away from prying eyes and ears. His own arrogance, his belief that he had me completely under his control would be his downfall. While we waited for his reply, I turned to Leo. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright, alive. Leo, after this, no matter what happens, you're done. No more dark web, no more hacking. You have a gift, a brilliant mind. You need to use it for good, you understand? He nodded. I know, after this I'm done being a ghost. My burner phone buzzed. It was a one-word reply from Marx. Alone. He was coming. The trap was set. As the sun began to dip toward the Texas hill country, casting long shadows across the landscape, I drove toward the lake. I was wearing a wire. It wasn't military grade. It was a tiny, high-fidelity listening device Leo had built, its signal routed directly and securely to a recording server he was monitoring from the basement. I was walking into a meeting with a man who had betrayed me, who had threatened to destroy my life and my family. I had no weapon, no backup, just a tiny electronic device and a desperate, crazy plan. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a soldier. I was walking onto the battlefield of my own choosing to fight a war on my own terms. The old iron bridge at Canyon Lake was a relic, a skeletal span of rusted steel arching over the deep, still water. It had been closed to traffic for years. It was a place of quiet isolation, the perfect setting for a conversation that could never be overheard. The sun was a fiery orange ball on the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of bruised purple and blood red. I arrived first, parking my car on the gravel turnout and walking to the center of the bridge. The wind whistled through the iron latticework, a mournful, lonely sound. I leaned against the railing, the encrypted solid-state drive with my father's treason a heavy, cold weight in my jacket pocket. I was the bait. A few minutes later, a dark government sedan pulled up. Colonel Marx got out. He was in civilian clothes, a polo shirt and slacks, but he moved with the same unyielding authority. He walked onto the bridge, his footsteps echoing on the metal grating. He was alone, just as he'd promised. He stopped a few feet from me, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Lieutenant, you've had your time. What's your decision? It's not that simple, sir, I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the frantic pounding of my heart. I had to keep him talking. I had to get him to say the words. There are things you do know. The file Leo took, it wasn't just the operative's insurance policy. It was part of a larger network. There are other copies, other dead man's switches. If I leak the file, they'll retaliate. Not just against my father, but against me, against my brother. It was a lie, but a plausible one, designed to appeal to his strategic mind. He considered this for a moment. Loose ends, unfortunate, but it doesn't change the mission. Your father is the primary target. Collateral damage is a part of any war. My brother is not collateral damage, I said, my voice rising with calculated anger. You put me in this position. You used me as a weapon against my own family. You betrayed your oath, and you betrayed me. I did what was necessary for the good of the country, he said, his voice a low growl. Your father is a traitor. He nullified any loyalty I owed him the day he started selling secrets. And you are a soldier. You are given a command and you execute it. This is no different. Your command is to neutralize a domestic threat. Your target just happens to be your father. And what about your threat? I countered, stepping closer. What about you, sir? Feeding classified information from a DOD investigation to a political campaign. Using your authority to blackmail a subordinate, is that also for the good of the country? A flicker of surprise, then anger, crossed his face. You're in no position to make accusations, Lieutenant. I have the logs, Colonel, I bluffed, praying Leo had been able to cover our tracks completely. The encrypted communications between you and Thorne's campaign manager. I know you're his source. I know this entire investigation has been a charade orchestrated by you." He went silent. The wind howled around us. He stared at me, his eyes narrowing into slits. He was reassessing, realizing his pawn was not as controllable as he'd thought. "You're a fool if you think that will save you," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "It's my word against yours, a decorated colonel against a disgraced lieutenant who obstructed a federal investigation to protect her treasonous family. Who do you think they'll believe?" "That's why you're going to help me," I said, playing my final card. I pulled the solid-state drive from my pocket and held it up. "This contains the full, unedited file on my father, the video, the ledger, everything. I'm not going to leak it to the press. That's too messy, too public. It hurts the country as much as it hurts him. I'm going to deliver it directly to the one person who can use it to neutralize my father quietly and effectively without a public scandal." "And who would that be?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "Marcus Thorne," I said. "I'm going to give him the kill shot he's been looking for, but you are going to broker the meeting. You are going to use your connection to his campaign to get me in a room with him. Tonight, you will vouch for me. You will tell him this evidence is real and that I am willing to cooperate in exchange for full immunity for myself and for my brother." He stared at me, the pieces clicking into place in his mind. It was a brilliant move from his perspective. I was accepting his ultimatum, but on my terms. By forcing him to broker the meeting, I was making him an active, undeniable conspirator in the exchange of classified intelligence for political gain. I was tying his fate directly to mine. If I went down, he would go down with me. "And why would I agree to that?" he asked. "Because if you don't," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "I will walk away from this bridge and I will release everything I have. The file on my father. The file on Thorne's illegal spying. And the audio recording of this entire conversation, detailing your blackmail and your conspiracy. I will burn it all to the ground, Colonel, your career, Thorne's career, my father's freedom, all of it, and I will gladly spend the rest of my life in prison knowing I took you down with me." I saw it in his eyes then. The checkmate. He was a strategist. He knew when a position was lost. He had underestimated me. He had assumed my actions would be driven by fear or a desperate love for my family. He never imagined they would be driven by a cold, calculated strategy for survival. He was silent for a long, tense minute. The sun had finally disappeared, leaving the world in a wash of gray twilight. "You're a better soldier than I thought, Nolan," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He pulled out his phone. "I'll make the call, but you should know Thorne is not a man to be trifled with. You're walking into the lion's den." "I've faced worse," I said. An hour later, I was in the back of a black car, speeding toward a secluded private hangar at the Austin airport. Marks was in the front seat, silent, his jaw clenched. He had made the arrangements. Thorne was waiting. He was preparing to leave for a fundraiser in Dallas, but he had agreed to a 5-minute meeting on his private jet. We were escorted past security and onto the tarmac. The jet was sleek, its engines humming softly. At the top of the stairs stood Marcus Thorne, flanked by 2 men, one of whom I recognized instantly from the campaign party. It was Michael Shaw, the ex-CIA spook. I walked up the stairs alone. Marks waited at the bottom. I stepped into the luxurious cabin. Thorne stood there, his arms crossed, his face an impassive mask. "Lieutenant," he said, "Colonel Marks tells me you have something for me, something that could change the course of this election." "I have the truth," I said. I placed the solid-state drive containing my father's file on the polished mahogany table between us. "This is a video of my father accepting payment from a foreign intelligence operative, and a ledger detailing years of treason. It's undeniable." Thorne looked at the drive, then at me. His eyes were like a prosecutor, searching for any hint of deception. "And what do you want in return?" "Full, documented immunity for my brother, Leo Nolan, and myself. For any and all actions related to the recent DoD data breach and the obstruction of the subsequent investigation." "That's a tall order, Lieutenant. You're asking me to bury a federal crime. You're running an illegal domestic surveillance operation against a U.S. senator using a rogue CIA asset," I countered, my voice low and steady. "You're funding it with an off-the-books slush fund. I have the proof. Payment records, encrypted communications, everything." I placed a second drive on the table next to the first. "This one is your file, Senator. Let's call it mutually assured destruction. You grant my immunity and this file gets buried forever. You don't, and it goes to the Justice Department along with my father's file. You may win the battle against him, but you'll lose the war." Thorn stared at the two drives, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who respects a worthy opponent. "You're your father's daughter, all right," he said. "You have his nerve." He picked up his phone and dialed. "Get me the Attorney General," he said into the phone. "Tell him it's Thorn. I need a letter of immunity drawn up. Immediately." He looked at me, the phone still pressed to his ear. "You'll have your deal, Lieutenant, but I want one more thing. I want your father. I don't want him to be a quiet casualty. I want him exposed. I want you to help me do it." The cabin door hissed shut. I was now in an alliance with my father's greatest enemy, a man who was just as corrupt in his methods, if not his motives. I had saved my brother and myself, but I had a sinking feeling that I had just traded one cage for another. The battle was over, but the war for my own soul was just beginning. The letter of immunity arrived via a secure digital courier less than an hour later. It was ironclad, signed by the Attorney General, granting full and total exoneration to me and Leo Nolan for our roles in the breach and the cover-up. I read it 3 times, the clinical legal language a stark contrast to the chaotic, emotional reality of the past week. I had done it. I had pulled my brother and myself from the fire. I stood on the tarmac, the cool night air a welcome relief after the tense atmosphere of the jet. The engines spooled up, their whine growing louder. Thorn stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. "The evidence against your father will be delivered to a trusted contact at the Washington Post tomorrow morning," he said over the noise. "The story will break in the evening. Your name will not be in it. You will be a protected source. As for Colonel Marks, he has agreed to retire, effective immediately, for health reasons. His part in this is buried. Consider that a professional courtesy." He gave me a final, enigmatic look. "You're a formidable asset, Lieutenant. If you ever decide you're tired of the uniform, my door is always open." The door hissed shut, and the jet began to taxi away, its lights disappearing into the darkness. I was left on the empty tarmac with Colonel Marks. He walked over to me, his face etched with a strange mixture of anger and respect. "You played the game well, Nolan," he said, his voice flat. "You won, but I want you to remember something. You may have saved your brother, but you did it by validating the very corruption you claim to despise. You made a deal with a man just as dirty as your father. You're one of them now." He turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the shadows of the hangar. His words were meant to be a final, parting shot, but they didn't sting as much as he'd intended. Because I knew something he didn't. The game wasn't over. I drove back to the house. The fundraiser was long over, the caterers gone, the lights dimmed. A single light burned in my father's study. I walked in without knocking. He was sitting behind his large mahogany desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out the window. He looked older, tired. "It's over, Dad," I said. He turned to look at me, his expression wary. "What are you talking about?" "The DOD breach, the investigation, all of it. The story is going to break tomorrow. The Washington Post has everything. The video, the ledger, your name, your treason." The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor, the color drained from his face. "How?" he whispered, his voice a choked, broken sound. "Who? Does it matter?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "You built this prison, Dad. I'm just the one who finally locked the door." He stared at me, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrified understanding. He didn't see his daughter anymore. He saw his executioner. You did this. To your own father? You stopped being my father the day you decided your ambition was worth more than your country," I said, my voice as hard as steel. "You betrayed everything this family was supposed to stand for. You betrayed everything I stand for. But more than that, you were willing to let Leo, your own son, take the fall for your crimes. You were going to let them crucify him to save yourself. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" This was the part of the plan I hadn't shared with Marks or Thorn. Leo, in his deep dive into the campaign servers, hadn't just found dirt on Thorn. He'd found my father's shadow campaign, his opposition research. He'd found proof that my father knew about the auction on the dark web. He hadn't been a passive victim. He knew the evidence was out there, and he had his own team trying to acquire it. But more than that, he had a contingency plan. If the hack was ever traced back to our house, his plan was to pin it all on his reclusive, mentally unstable son. He had already prepared a narrative, complete with falsified psychiatric evaluations, to paint Leo as a disturbed young man, a lone wolf hacker acting out against a father he could never please. He was going to sacrifice his own child. "That's why I did it," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "Not for Thorn, not for the country. I did it to save my brother from his own father." He crumpled in his chair, a broken man, the smooth, confident facade of Senator Nolan stripped away to reveal the coward beneath. He had nothing left to say. I walked out, leaving him with the wreckage of his life. I found Leo in the basement, packing his servers into boxes. He looked up as I entered, his eyes questioning. "It's done," I said. "We're safe." He came over, and for the first time in years, he hugged me. He was trembling. "Thank you, Dana," he whispered. "I'll always protect you, Leo," I said, holding him tight. "Always." The story broke the next day, an earthquake that shook the political landscape of Texas and the nation. Senator Daniel Nolan, the patriot, the frontrunner, was exposed as a traitor. He withdrew from the race in disgrace, his career over, his life in ruins, facing a federal indictment. Marcus Thorne won the election in a landslide. He kept his word. The immunity held. The names Dana and Leo Nolan were never mentioned. The Janus case was quietly closed, the ghost of Arthur Finch taking the official blame. I submitted my resignation from the Army the following week. My career was built on an oath, and my actions, however necessary, had broken it. I could no longer wear the uniform with the honor it deserved. A few months later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop near the UT Austin campus. A young man walked in, laughing with a group of friends. He was wearing a university hoodie, a backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked happy, normal, and for the first time in his life, he looked free. It was Leo. He had enrolled in the university's computer science program. He wasn't a ghost in the basement anymore. He was just a college kid, using his brilliant mind to build things, not to hide secrets. He saw me and smiled, a real, genuine smile. I had lost a father, a career, and a part of myself in the fire, but I had saved my brother. I had found the third option. My choice wasn't between family and country. It was about defining what those words truly meant. My country was an ideal, an oath I had tried to honor even when I broke its laws. And my family was the scared, brilliant boy who was now walking toward a future he never thought he'd have. The revenge I sought wasn't against my father or his enemies. It was revenge against the idea that we are trapped by the sins of others. We are not defined by the betrayals we suffer, but by the choices we make in their wake. I had made my choice. I had chosen my brother. I had chosen integrity over institution. And in doing so, I had finally, truly, found my own way home.